Hey, Greentown Wesleyan, so happy to be back with you today. I can't wait to share with you guys this message that I believe Jesus has to speak to us. I hope you guys have been able to stay at peace during this quarantine, during this time that we all find ourselves in. I hope you guys have been relying fully on the person of Christ. And so with that, we're going to be turning to John chapter 15 today. It's a couple of verses in John 15, starting in verse 5. So if you guys will, why don't you turn there with me and see what God has to offer each one of us today. Jesus says in John 15, he says, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing." And I love the way that we talk about time in today's world. We talk about time. We say that we spend time. We say that we spend time. We talk about time in almost transactional terms. So one of the questions I want to ask today is what has been your return on investment when it comes to the time that you have spent the past week? What has been your ROI in fruitfulness? Have you spent time abiding in the presence of Jesus? If you look back on the past 7 days, how would you describe it? Many of us, if we're honest, I think it's really easy for every one of us to do. But if we're honest, a lot of us abide more in the presence of Fox News, abide more in the presence of Netflix, or abide more in the presence of Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. We spend a lot of time, whether it's on our devices or just consuming information, rather than abiding in the presence of Jesus. And I think the way that I would describe abiding is simply this: choosing to stay in the presence of. Choosing to stay in the presence of. So when we talk about abiding, we're talking about choosing to stay in the presence of Jesus. And through that, we're going to bear so much fruit of hope, of peace, of love, and just becoming more and more like Jesus each and every day. I pray that you would be encouraged. You would have faith to abide in the presence of Jesus. John 14:6 says that Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. A lot of us know the truth of Jesus. Thank God that we do. Thank God that we know that Jesus died and he rose so that each one of us could live an abundant life. We know that he does provide that abundant life. But I think there's a disconnect between what we experience here and now and the life that Jesus has to offer us. What is that disconnect? Why is there a disconnect? And I think one of the things I want to offer you guys is that maybe Jesus has been teaching us something all along, and it's been found in the way that he lived, in the way of Jesus. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And perhaps the way that he lived has so much to offer each one of us. And in one word, man, if I could describe the way that Jesus lived, he just lived in an abiding in the presence of the Father. And so I hope that teaches each one of us that we can learn to abide in his presence too, because he showed his own need to abide in the presence of the Father. One book that's just helped me out so much when it comes to these things, when it comes to abiding in the presence of Jesus. One book that's helped me out is called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And it's just born out of the notion and the thought that each one of us, we often live with such a hurry. It's not our fault, but it's not all of our fault, but this society, it lives in a pandemic of hurry. And man, I think a lot of us understand, we know deep in our hearts that Jesus is calling us into more. He's calling us into more. John Mark Comer, the author of the book, he has an interesting way of describing discipleship under Jesus. He says, when we disciple under Jesus, we are a lot more like an apprentice than anything else. And so my question for each one of you today is like, how does your time reflect your apprenticeship under Jesus? How does your time reflect the fact that you want to apprentice under Jesus? He says this beautiful thing. He lays it out very simply. He says, in order to be an apprentice of Jesus, you got to be with Jesus, you got to be like Jesus, and you got to do what he did. And I think it's so profoundly simple, but man, sometimes it's hard to do. I think the linchpin, the thing that keeps us away from it, but also the thing that can draw us right into being an apprentice of Jesus, is just choosing to stay in the presence of Jesus. So I'm praying today that you would be encouraged to choose to stay in his presence, whether it's through reading this book, whether it's through prayer, whether it's through just a meal with your family. I pray that you would be encouraged to stay in his presence, because it's from that we're going to bear much fruit. He says, be like Jesus, be with Jesus, and do what he did. I'm praying that you would be encouraged to do that as well today. Have a great day, Greentown Wesleyan. Hope you're all doing well, and we'll keep in touch soon.